In the last lecture, we looked at the main competitor to theism in Christianity, namely the idea of naturalism, that there is no supernatural realm, that there is no God, that all of existence is simply matter and motion. And we saw that the theory of naturalism cannot even explain itself. It can't explain abstract universals such as the laws of logic, even though everybody believes them, including naturalists. But naturalism also entails the view that everything that exists now is the result of an unguided process of evolution, and namely that variation is due to mutations in the genes of plants and animals, and that the accumulated mutations that occur over time are the basis for evolution, that some changes or mutations cause plants or animals to be naturally selective, that they are able to survive and propagate their kind better, and thus they are naturally selected over time. But there is no end in mind. This is not guided by any supernatural being, but is random and unguided, or as Richard Dawkins called it, that naturalism is the blind watchmaker. In other words, things may look like they are designed, but there is no true design. Things evolve naturally by naturalistic processes. Now, despite their scientific orthodoxy today, naturalism and the theory of unguided evolution, which naturalism entails, are not able to scientifically or factually account for existence as it is. Among other things, naturalistic evolution asserts that at all foundational levels of existence, existing conditions give rise to their opposites. For example, that something came from nothing, that variation came from uniformity, that order came from disorder, that life came from non-life, that intelligence, mind, and reason came from non-intelligence, non-mind, and non-reason. Now, many philosophers, both Christian and non-Christian, and scientists, have raised issues that go to the heart of the explanatory power and even the validity of non-theistic theories of evolution. And this goes to the heart of the neo-Darwinian orthodoxy that's reigning today. We're going to look at some of that in the next several lectures. But to begin with, in this lecture, I want to look at the fossil record and certain microbiological evidence that absolutely contradicts what the theory of naturalistic evolution claims. Now, as French zoologist Pierre-Paul Grasset points out, that the process of evolution is revealed only through fossil forms, and therefore only paleontology, the study of fossils, can provide evidence of evolution. The fact of the matter is, however, that when Darwin wrote his book on the origin of species, he was aware that there was a major problem with the fossil evidence. And he said that if his theory is true, there should be innumerable transitional forms of creatures that have existed. But he asked, why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the earth? If my theory is true, numberless intermediate varieties linking closely together all the species of the same group must assuredly have existed. But the fact of the matter is, they do not. And he said that geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain. And this perhaps is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against his theory. Now, what Darwin said, he had no explanation for this. The only thing that he claimed was that the fossil record was incomplete, and so that he was anticipating that over time, as more fossils are discovered, that all of those so-called missing links would be found. But that, in fact, has not occurred. In the over 160 years since Origin of Species was published, millions of fossils have been recovered, and the geologic record now is no longer in a state of extreme imperfection, as Darwin alleged. In fact, now the fossil record is mature, but the fact of the matter is that the innumerable transitional forms that Darwin said have to have existed if his theory is true simply have not been unearthed because they did not exist. In other words, Darwin himself proposed the test, or what would falsify his theory, namely, his theory posits that there are innumerable transitional forms linking different types of creatures, and that if they don't exist, they have to exist if his theory is correct. But the fact of the matter is, they don't exist. And in fact, what we see in the fossil record is how different types of creatures, species, phyla, order, all the different categories of creatures, both animals and plants, they appear abruptly, fully developed. And this is particularly true during what was called the Cambrian explosion, which refers to a time approximately, according to those scientists who accept the belief that the Earth is millions of years old, approximately 538 or so million years ago, known as the Cambrian period. At that time, practically all major animal phyla started appearing in the fossil records. They appeared suddenly. There were no ancestors. In fact, one writer says only 3 animal phyla are known to have existed in the Precambrian period, but 20 new phyla appear during the Cambrian, and only 4 other new phyla appear in the post-Cambrian periods. And so this Cambrian explosion was a tremendous number of new forms of organisms and body parts, and that makes absolutely no sense on a Darwinian evolutionary theory, because all of these had no known precursors, and they all appear abruptly in the fossil record and fully formed and developed. And so Darwin was aware of that, but as I say, and he viewed it as a major objection to his theory, and the discoveries since Darwin's time have only confirmed that the fossil record not only does not support Darwinian evolution, it directly contradicts what the theory of evolution would say. Now, the problem goes beyond just a lack of transitional fossils, because the interesting thing is that the lack of transitional fossils, it's not just an absence of fossils, but the selective incompleteness of the fossil record. The gaps, the so-called gaps in the fossil record, always happen to be at the nodes connecting the major branches in what Darwin posited was the tree of life. In other words, the fossil record itself is clear, and it contradicts, because the lack of fossils are where Darwin posited one type of creature would change into another one. Well, it's that area between types of creatures where there are no fossils, because one type of creature did not transition into another type of creature. In other words, the fossil record is clear, and it contradicts the idea that one type of being can slowly, gradually turn into some other kind of being. And in fact, paleontologists, even evolutionists, even non-believers admit this. For example, paleontologist George Gaylord Simpson wrote that gaps among known orders, classa, and phyla are systematic and almost always large. Francisco Ayala and James Valentine, again, evolutionary scientists, say there are about 25 major living subdivisions or phyla of the animal kingdom alone, all with gaps between them that are not bridged by any known intermediaries. And paleontologist Stephen Stanley puts it this way: the known fossil record fails to document a single example of phyletic evolution accomplishing a major morphological transition, and hence offers no evidence that the gradualist model posited by Darwin can be valid. And so, but it's more than that, because Dr. E.S. Russell, a Scottish biologist and philosopher of biology, he points out this: each of the great phyla of animals is built upon a structural plan quite different from all of the others. Their origin is unknown, and between them there exist no true connecting links, and there is no likelihood of the direct transformation of one kind into another. So the fact of the matter is, all the different types of beings, if the theory of naturalistic evolution were true, it would show simple ones slowly becoming more complex, and because they start out as common ancestors, they all kind of look alike. But that's not what the record shows at all. It shows that the different types of beings are all structurally very different. They all appeared abruptly in the fossil record. There are no connecting links at all, and so there is no basis in the fossil record to support the idea of this gradual transition of one kind of being to another. Now, the so-called Cambrian explosion, which I mentioned, contradicts Darwin's theory in yet another way. The theory of naturalistic evolution posits that new animal forms emerged from a common ancestor, and therefore they would at first be quite similar to each other, and large differences between them would occur later on as mutations and selection occurred and accumulated. But the fact is, the fossil record directly contradicts that. Geophysicist and philosopher of science Stephen Meyer states that the disparity in the large differences between forms of animals that appeared suddenly in the Cambrian explosion arose before and not after the diversification of many representatives occurred. In other words, the great changes occurred right at the beginning. As Michael Denton, medical doctor and scientist, he summarizes and points out that nature is clearly a discontinuum. In other words, you have different varieties of plants and animals. They have no common ancestors. They are based on different structural plans, and so they are discontinuous from each other. Now, there are a number of other things here that the fossil record discloses. First, the different groups of or types of plants and animals all have distinct and unique what are called taxa-defining novelties that appear fixed and immutable. What is a taxa-defining anomaly? Well, for example, the pentadactyl limb of all terrestrial vertebrates, the three-part insect body plan, the four nested concentric whorl patterns of angiosperm flowers, the amniotic membrane, and many others. In other words, there are these distinct patterns of different plants and animals that are different from each other. They all remain the same. There's no known transition, and they don't evolve. And as one entomologist, William Thompson, he says that the last thing we should expect on Darwinian principles is the persistence of a few common fundamental structural plans. Yet that is what we find in the fossil record. Additionally, many other types of individual species, from bacteria through all the classes of animals to mammals, many of them have not evolved at all. In other words, they appear in the fossil record from millions of years ago. They're the same now as they were back then. In fact, Pierre Grasset, he lists scores of such creatures in his book, including animals such as possums, which live in widely different environments and therefore should have been the beneficiaries of environmental conditions that were theoretically favorable to evolution, and yet they don't evolve at all. How does the theory of mutations and natural selection account for that? That these types of creatures have been the most stable, some of them for hundreds of millions of years, and they have mutated as much as other creatures, and yet they don't change. Also, in the fossil record, many fossils appear in the, quote, wrong order as predicted by evolution. Now, noted evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins states, evolution makes the strong prediction that if a single fossil turned up in the wrong geologic stratum, the theory would be blown out of the water. And yet we see that all the time. Creationist Dr. Carl Werner states that if evolution did not occur, and animals did not change significantly over time, and if all of the animals and plants were created at one time and lived together, humans, dinosaurs, oak trees, etc., then we should be able to find fossils of at least some modern plants and animals alongside dinosaurs in the rock layers. Well, he tested his thesis by looking at fossils found in dinosaur dig sites so that scientists who support evolution could not suggest that the fossils that turned up were not old. And so all of the fossils he found, for comparison, were found in rock layers containing dinosaurs. Well, Werner was amazed at his findings. In these dinosaur rock layers, he found fossilized examples of every major invertebrate animal phylum living today. He found fish, sharks and rays, bony fish, sturgeons, salmon, herring, jawless fish, and they look the same as they do today. He found modern appearing frogs and salamanders, all of today's reptile groups, and so on and so forth. Modern types of birds, including parrots, owls, penguins, ducks, and others, were found in the dinosaur dig site. He found fossilized mammals, looking like squirrels, possums, hedgehogs, and others. And so he said, few people are aware of the great number of mammal species found with the dinosaurs. And this is completely contrary to what the theory of naturalistic evolution claims. But other researchers have found all kinds of other examples of fossils in the wrong geologic strata, including pollen fossils. Evidence of flowering plants were found in the Precambrian strata. In other words, before the Cambrian explosion, there is fossils of evidence of flowering plants. But according to evolutionists, flowering plants first evolved 160 million years ago, but the Cambrian strata is older than 550 million years. Now, dinosaurs supposedly evolved into birds, but a type of bird called Confuciusaurus was a true beaked bird that predated the, quote, feathered dinosaurs that it allegedly came from. It also has been found in the stomach, that beaked bird, of a fossilized dinosaur. Grass was found in fossilized dinosaur dung, but grass was not supposed to have evolved for at least 10 million years after the dinosaurs were extinct. And so there's all kinds of other data showing that what actually exists in the different strata of the Earth are not in the order that evolution would posit, and in fact, that contradicts the whole theory begun by Darwin. Now, one of the most interesting and perhaps significant findings that contradicts evolution and the whole idea that the Earth was just gradually created slowly by naturalistic processes is the work of nuclear physicist Robert Gentry. His work concentrated on something called polonium halos, which are minute spherical areas of discoloration of minerals found in Precambrian granite. And it's resulting from the decay, the radioactive decay of the mineral polonium. Now, polonium-218 has a half-life of only 3 minutes. Now, the significance, but nevertheless, in the Precambrian rock layers, there's evidence of these spherical discolorations from the radioactive decay of polonium. Now, the significance of this is that according to evolutionary geology, the granites containing these polonium halos had originally formed as hot magma cooling over long ages. But the radioactivity responsible for these halos is of such fleeting existence that it would have disappeared long before the magma had time to cool and form the granite rocks. All of this indicates that the granite in which these polonium halos are found did not gradually form over millions of years, but had to have been present beforehand, and that is consistent with the fact that it was created instantaneously. Only God could have done that. And so, with respect to the fossil record, Darwin himself said that if the fossil record does not reveal innumerable transitional forms, his theory would be falsified. Now, the fossil record is no longer imperfect, as Darwin thought, and in fact, it reveals the exact opposite of what Darwin's theory predicted. There are no innumerable transitional forms. There are no transitional forms at all. Furthermore, we see multiple organisms that have refused to evolve and multiple organisms that appear in the wrong order. So consequently, by his own tests, Darwin's theory is false. And even Stephen Jay Gould, the late Harvard biology professor, well-known evolutionist, said that the neo-Darwinian orthodox is effectively dead despite its persistence as textbook orthodoxy. In short, naturalistic evolution is inconsistent with and cannot account for the evidence of the fossil record. Christianity is consistent with and can account for the evidence of the fossil record. The reason, of course, is that the Bible reveals what actually happened. namely God created plants and animals and designed them to reproduce after their kind, not transition and become something else. In other words, according to the Bible, and as we see in the fossil record, there are limits to the variations that can occur within each kind. Now, this is not a religious issue, but a factual one. And the question is, which view comports with the evidence and which one does not? Well, the answer, it seems to me, is quite obvious. And the fossil record is actually confirmed by the patterns that we see in the microbiological evidence. Now, over the last 30 years or so, there's been a tremendous revolution in microbiology, the study of genes and DNA and the cells and so on and so forth. And all that biochemical and molecular evidence completely failed to substantiate Darwin's theory. In fact, molecular biology contradicts what evolution would posit. Michael Denton, I referred to him earlier, he provides a table in one of his books of 33 comparisons between cytochrome C of bacteria and a wide variety of non-bacterial organisms, including different yeasts, plants, insect, fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. And the result is that at the molecular level, there is no ascending hierarchy as one goes from yeasts to plants to insects, fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. In fact, the exact opposite is true. He says, at the molecular level, when the vertebrates are compared with non-vertebrate organisms, all type are equidistant apart from each other. In other words, and he said, at the molecular level, human beings are as close to lamprey eels as are fish. That is directly contradictory to what naturalistic evolution would claim. The same phenomenon occurs throughout the animal kingdom. Lungfish is what's called a living fossil. It's virtually identical to lungfish dated 350 million years ago. However, lungfish proteins are no more or less far away from the proteins of lampreys as are the proteins of any other fish or amphibian or mammal. All that means is that at the molecular level, each class of organism is unique and not linked to intermediate species. So, Darwin was completely unaware of all of this microbiology. But what we are seeing now, the evidence from microbiology complements and is basically shows the same thing as we saw from the fossil record, that all organisms are distinct, that there are no intermediate or transitional forms, there's no hierarchy that we see in the fossil record, and the same thing is reproduced at the molecular level. In other words, that the different at the molecular level, the types of organisms do not show a hierarchy going from simple to complex and so on and so forth. And so, in fact, as Pierre Grasset said, if naturalistic evolution were true, the quantity of DNA should be proportional to the number of genes. More complex organisms should have more DNA. But that's not the case. And he said that the nuclei of many protozoans and protophytes and the lower metazoans, in other words, what are theoretically the simplest creatures, contain just as much, if not more, DNA than do birds and mammals. Indeed, one scientist said that humans have about 25,000 genes, but rice has about 50,000. And so we see here that there are, one of the genes, bacteria have as much or more genes than does a human cell. And so again, that whole idea is directly contrary to what evolution would posit. In fact, you look at the DNA and the RNA that They've done studies showing that, Darwin posited there's a tree of life. Everything comes from a common ancestor, and things get more complex as evolution occurs. But one writer says that in the early 1990s, it became possible to sequence actual bacterial genes rather than just RNA. Everybody expected these DNA sequences to confirm the hierarchy, but that was not the case. This person, Graham Lawton, cited a study of 2,000 genes that are common to humans, frogs, sea squirts, sea urchins, fruit flies, and nematodes. According to evolutionary theory, one should have been able to construct an evolutionary tree showing the relationship between these 6 types of organisms. However, different genes told contradictory stories. Some genes would show a relationship this way. Some genes showed a different relationship entirely. And so, as one evolutionary biologist says, we have no evidence at all that the tree of life is a reality. And he added, that bombshell has even persuaded some that our fundamental view of biology needs to change. In short, at virtually every level, the molecular and microbiological facts contradict what naturalistic evolution would hypothesize should be the case. So, as was true with the fossil record, so is true at the genetic level. Different organisms, they do not show a hierarchy going from supposedly simple creatures all the way up to mammals. There are no links between them, and the microbiological evidence does not show that evolution has occurred, or that one type of being has evolved into another. This is fundamentally, this is at all levels, both on the fossil morphological level, the way things look, and at the microbiological level. The data is clear and consistent and completely contradicts what the theory of naturalistic evolution would posit. We will look in the next lecture at more of similar data from microbiology and things like mutations and natural selection, and whether any of that can account for changes from one type of a being into another, or can lead to the creation of complex things like eyes, or so on and so forth. We will look at that in the next lecture.